Wow, it's really delayed.
It's off.
Yeah,
You're black.
You're good? Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Department of Medicine Grand Rounds. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome our Grand Round speaker for today. Dr. Setnik is the physician champion for Pediatric Readiness at Littleton Regional Healthcare, which is a level 3 trauma center in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. He is an emergency physician and simulation expert with over 20 years of experience. He specializes in leveraging experiential learning to solve complex system challenges. He previously served as a director of clinical programs at the Center for Medical Simulation and a lecturer in anesthesia at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Setnik is a sought-after speaker dedicated to fostering relational excellence within healthcare teams, ensuring every patient receives exceptional care and that clinicians are ready for the most challenging moments of their careers. I met Dr. Setnik and his team at the Center for Medical Simulation during a training program here 2 years ago. And the feedback skills that I learned about good judgment were, frankly, eye-opening and life-changing. I will tell you that anytime I run into someone who also participated in the program with me, we always share stories about how we use the skills not just for medical students and residents, but also on our spouses and our children. So I hope you will also take away from this talk as much as I have. And so I'm delighted that he's here to share this with you. Creating a learning environment, and I think the emphasis on co-creating a learning environment with your learner with good judgment is something that I think will be really useful to all of us, whether you are a faculty or resident or student. And so please join me in welcoming Dr. Setnik. Sorry, just one more thing I forgot, David, sorry. The CME code for today is 31641.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Sarang. So this is not a setup, but I'm going to start with a story which comes immediately after I took my training at the Center for Medical Simulation in 2013. We run a week-long seminar, and while I was off becoming the best version of myself, my wife was caring for our 2 children, our 2 dogs, and working full-time as a family medicine faculty at the local residency that we have. And so I too was full of these new ideas and these ways of talking and giving feedback that were changing my life. And I came home late on Friday night and went to bed and woke up in the morning, and she had done everything for the whole week. And when I woke up, I saw that she'd even run the dishwasher. But I noticed that she made a critical error loading the dishwasher. And I'll zoom in if you haven't picked it up yet. There's a cast iron skillet in the dishwasher. And if you don't know, that is like a never event. It's like wrong site surgery. Right? So when she came down after sleeping in, she looked a little tired. And I said, honey, can I give you some feedback? Because I had learned how to give feedback in this most amazing way, right? And I just want you to know that she was very generous. She said to me, honey, don't use your SimLab bullshit on me. And I do want to report that we celebrated our 27th Valentine's in Puerto Rico a couple weeks ago. So things are still, we survived the moment. But I think it's actually a really valuable story about the idea that I'm not going to be able to provide you with the perfect way of delivering feedback if you're not meeting the learners where they're at or whoever you're talking to as a human. And I will hopefully provide some ways of thinking about the feedback moment that serve you well, and that is the big goal of today, okay? So, as Sarang said, this idea of good judgment is, a with good judgment approach is really what the Center for Medical Simulation is focused on. And if you take our week-long seminar, you're going to spend 5 hours probably practicing with coaching this skill. And so we're going to touch on it right now. And I think touching on it hopefully in a way that helps create some ideas and some action for you. And then some other concepts around giving feedback or having feedback conversations or having improvement conversations. And also, many of you are in the learner level, recognizing feedback for what it is, okay? So that's also an important goal.
Remove that.
Oh,
It's covered
thank you.
in
You
Zoom.
told me to do that, and I didn't do it.
And then the video also in the upper right corner. Thanks.
Better? All right, I'm taking that feedback. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad
Thank you
you.
for letting me give you feedback.
I'm glad you did that. Okay, so I don't have any disclosures. Thank you for the intro. I, about a year ago, transitioned from a regional hospital that I had been working in to a rural site. So I'm now fully involved in rural medicine, which has been a really reinvigorating part of my career. The challenges that we face are now new to me instead of the old ones, which were entrenched. Now, of course, the same challenges are entrenched at this organization that I'm at, but they're not entrenched in my mind. So I've been really reinvigorated. So that's why you see my role now is at Littleton Regional Hospital, which is a very small hospital in northern New Hampshire in the mountains. And if you ski in New Hampshire and you hurt your knee, you're probably going to come see us. And I've been at the Center for Medical Simulation for 7 years now, teaching in our programs. And during that time, got a master's in health professions education. So my focus has really been teaching and learning in the healthcare space. And what I want to say about that is that we actually have these moments where we really want to give our learners important feedback. And they, like my wife, are exhausted. And we might need to figure out when we deliver the feedback before we figure out how to deliver the feedback. And so that's what we'll talk about now. Okay. Whatever we did has broken my computer. So the first idea is that we want to separate what we mean by feedback into distinct categories that we can then apply at the right moment. Navigate the tension between milestones or other evaluation tools and helping the learner in front of us become the best version of themselves, which sometimes is in conflict with this homogenizing rubric that we're given. And then we'll explore the mindsets behind with good judgment, because I think the mindsets are at least as important and probably more important as the technique. And then we'll do a little bit, a touch on separating educational interventions between teaching, telling people what to do, coaching, helping motivate individuals, and exploring, being co-learners with our peers and our learners in topics that there's no real right answer for. So the first goal here is to separate types of feedback and apply the right tool for the right moment. Okay, so if we think back to the dishwasher moment, okay, and if we were to characterize feedback as three different things, one of three different things. One is appreciation, okay, thank you for working so hard. And two is evaluation, how do you rank compared to where you're supposed to be or your peers or some other tool. And three is coaching or exploring or some type of improvement-based conversation. In that moment where my wife came down after caring for the family in the house and running the dishwasher, if I were to give her one of those three types of feedback, which one would she accept and not swear at me? Appreciation. And in our clinical space, when is it that we tend to give people feedback? The end of the day, right? So we've got a lot of ED people here. You're working with a trainee, you know you've got your feedback tool you're supposed to do, and it tends to be that we haven't really done it until the end of the day, and we look at them and we want to help them grow, and so we try to coach them in that moment. But both us and them are pretty fried at the end of a shift. And it might be that they can't accept a coaching conversation in that moment very well, and they can't actually learn to apply in that moment. And oftentimes we won't even see them in the future for weeks. And so you often have the same thing on your medicine rounds where it's the end of the day and you want to give people something to work on, but maybe tomorrow they're going to be in the clinic and they won't get to come back. And a key element of improvement-based conversations is people need an opportunity to show you that they can apply what you told them. And so thinking about moving the feedback conversation from the hottest part of the day or the most exhausting part of the day, I mean emotionally hottest part of the day, like we just had a resuscitation, let's do some coaching, that might not be the right moment, okay? So I want to do a little thought experiment with you guys. What would you want to hear from a learner that would tell you they were ready for a coaching or exploring conversation? So you sit down with somebody and you say, hey, let's talk about so-and-so topic. How's that sound to you? What would you need to hear back from them that they are ready to get some coaching in that moment?
I'm ready for feedback now.
I'm ready for feedback now. Oh, okay. Have you ever heard that from anyone ever? Yes, okay. What are the contexts that they say that?
Are you ready to talk about the day?
Okay, all right. So sometimes people are ready and people do want to grow. Now, if you say, hey, let's talk about the day, and somebody says, oh, great, I'd love to hear how can I get better at running a resuscitation, right? And you give them appreciation and you say, all right, well, thanks for your hard work today. How does that leave them? How do they feel?
I feel good.
They might feel good. I think they're going to feel a little let down. They're going to feel a little bit let down. You try to give them appreciation and they want to get better. You're not meeting them where they're at, right? And you might not be meeting their needs in that moment. So there is a time and a place for appreciation. And there's also a time and place for coaching or improvement conversation. And to some extent, we need to start thinking of feedback as a procedure that has indications and contraindications and different techniques for different types of feedback. Some days at the end of a long day, people stayed late, they're overworked. They just need a little appreciation. Thank you for your hard work today. Tomorrow, would it be okay if we talk about X, Y, and Z? But some students, they're super hungry and they really want to get better. And if they say to you, well, I want to know how should I do X, Y, and Z, you have to meet them there. Evaluation is also really important. As we talked about last night, sometimes learners will say to you, how do I get honors in this rotation, right? And they're asking, how am I stacking up to the rubric? How am I stacking up to the peers? And if we can't tell them, then there's a gap. Okay, and what I'd like to do now is transition into how do we use our judgment, our best judgment about this human, and a rubric to try to help them see where do they fit, and also how are they as a unique human going to be able to grow. Okay, so it's this tension between standards and individual learning needs, right? Our standards in some ways are quite homogenizing, and that's for a purpose. Whether they're good or bad, the milestones can be helpful in certain ways. And we're going to do a little thought experiment about that. Okay, so what I want to say is there is no such thing as non-judgmental. I think people in New Jersey are not that different. In Boston, we walk around all day judging people, okay? Those shoes are wrong for this weather. That person is wearing something X, Y, and Z. That person talks this way. We judge all the time. And if we look at this, this screen here, what I want to ask is, I'm going to get a show of hands. You guys have judgments about this. How many people in here have been trained latte art observers? Not you've had 10,000 latte arts that you've looked at, but you've been trained in the rubric that would be applied to latte art. Anybody here trained in it? No, okay. But you all have judgments about this. So I'm actually really curious, who here thinks A is the best latte art up there? Okay, all right, I agree. Who here thinks B is the best latte art up there? You've got a couple people. Why do you think B?
I don't know if it's necessarily the best art, but for me personally, I think aesthetically it's very appealing. I like the little attention to detail.
You like the attention to detail, the little sprinkle. The color is different. You've seen a million brown and whites and how many purples. It stands out. It's different, right? This was a taro latte that I had in New York City a couple of years ago. It was amazing. It was like sweet mashed potato breakfast. Okay, who thinks C is the best latte art? A lot of people. Somebody give me some reasons why you think C is the best latte art.
It's cute.
It's cute. Have you ever seen anything like it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
I go to a lot of Asian cafes. So.
Okay, I had not. This was in Australia when we were teaching the course last year on a little island off the coast of Perth where they have these quackus, which are these adorable little squirrel-type rodents, or not rodents, marsupials, that try to take your coffee. And I'd never seen anything like it, which is why I took the picture. All right, so who here thinks D is the best latte art? Okay, give me some reasons why D is the best.
Like really like flows well with the lines. I think C is like a little more detailed and complicated, but I think like D is like the best artistic.
Okay, all right. So it's artistic. It's got this flowy nature to it. It's inviting, kind of. Something about it is really inviting. Okay, so now we're going to look at what the internet says is the rubric. So there are 5 core pillars to evaluating latte art, and they are contrast, symmetry, clarity of lines, harmony and size, which means does the picture fill the space appropriately, like a dancer filling the stage, and the milk texture, which you can't really get a sense of on a picture. Okay, so now I don't know that that's a perfect rubric, okay? None of our rubrics are perfect. But if the goal is passing the rubric, then we can actually advise the people creating the art how to do it better, okay? So let's apply the rubric to the taro root latte art, the letter B. So we've got the 5 elements on top. How would you advise this artist to be a little bit stronger so they're more likely to get more hands? They only got 2 hands, and I think it's pretty nice. So how would you advise them to get better? It's not symmetric, right? So it wouldn't take much for them to do the sprinkle of decoration all the way around. Okay, it would have felt somehow less artistic. Okay. All right. So they would have had to make a decision. Do I want to change my art to meet this rubric or not? Right? And there might be certain moments, like Oskies, where they do want to change their art to meet a rubric. And there might be other moments, like the real world, where they want to be the best version of themselves, right? So how do rubrics help us? Well, they help us to have a conversation which is not just how do I feel about your performance, which very much comes across as what do I think of you and your identity as a human or as a physician, or as a physician in training. And when we have these conversations with our, especially people who are underneath us, and it's about what we think of them, it's very much an identity threat. But when it's how they compare to a standard, then there's this other thing that their actions are being compared to, and they can decide how much do I want to work towards that standard. Do I believe in that standard? Yes, I want to get honors. What does honors take? It's really valuable for them to know that. They can make a decision then. If there's not that much transparency, though, it just comes across as, we don't like their art. The performance of medicine, I'm going to argue, there's so many good ways of being a team leader in a resuscitation that depend on your gender, your age, your height, how other people see you, how loud-spoken you are. And there's so many different ways of doing that well that our learners deserve to know how they are evaluated in their rubric, but they also deserve us to help them become the best version of themselves and the choice that they're going to make towards that rubric or not. So just a little touch on what rubrics are helpful for, and they reduce the temperature in these evaluative feedback conversations because it's compared against a standard as opposed to their identity, okay? But we have to be able to set that aside a little bit to have these real conversations about them as individuals and their art. I used to think that learning happened when I said the words. And then, then the world taught me that actually learning happened not just cognitively inside the person that I'm talking to, where they're starting to make sense of the words that I said, but also socially, in the space between us. Do they trust me? And building trust, just like the conversations you have with your patients, it doesn't matter what medicine you prescribe. If they don't trust you, they're not going to take it, right? So we have to build trust before people will start to appreciate what we say. And one of the ways that we build trust, one of the key ways that we build trust is through transparency. Rubrics transparently displayed, this is the evaluation that you're being compared against, are really helpful for people because they can start to trust that they know what it takes to reach certain grades. Now that's a challenge for us because in general, our rubrics stink. They really do. I hate to say it. It's hard. You guys might have a different opinion. This is my opinion. I looked up the standards for interpersonal and communication skills for internal medicine. They're very similar for emergency medicine, by the way. And you're supposed to check a box here. I'm going to walk up to the screen. Right? Supposed to check that box. The problem with checking that box is manyfold. One is how many people here have had explicit training on what these rubrics mean and how you're supposed to apply them?
We're emergency medicine people, it's coming in an hour.
Beautiful, all right. But how do you resolve the challenge of two different standards getting one grade? I don't know. As an organization, you have to decide how to resolve that standard, right? But until you're trained in how your organization wants you to resolve it, if somebody gets a level 4 on the bottom part, which is giving feedback, and a level 2 on the top part, which is working as a teammate, how are you supposed to resolve that? Do you give them a 3? Do you give them a 2 because it's their lowest? Do you give them a 4 because it's their highest? Well, different people are going to do different things. That noise, the lack of clear signal, is unhelpful to the learner. at them knowing where they're at. So if you're going to use something like a rubric, you have to learn how your department is going to resolve these challenges so that it's more consistent. Now, there is no such thing as everybody taking a rubric and rating a performance the same way, okay? And there is unhelpful noise, which is, I don't know how we're supposed to resolve this difference. And there's helpful noise, which is, I really like the fern, and I really like the taro root, okay? So that's helpful difference, helpful noise in the ratings. I think, so I'm gonna give examples from team leadership on helpful noise. You know, I think you can be a great team leader even though you're really sort of soft-spoken. And I'm gonna help you get there. Here are some things you can do. Other people, I think you need to speak louder as the team leader. You're getting two different sets of advice, but that can actually be helpful because two different opinions of the art of medicine can be helpful as long as the person gets to choose what they can take from each one. Okay, so there's unhelpful noise in the application of rubric, which is we actually don't know how our organization has decided to apply this, and we haven't had those conversations yet. And then there's also some helpful variability. People get to see different versions of the performance of the artistry of medicine, and that helps them grow into the best version of themselves. Zooming in on level 4, level 5, IM milestones on feedback, what we see are really nice words: adaptive, modeling, flexibility, okay? So I'm gonna show you a little bit about debriefing with good judgment, or with good judgment, and applying it to feedback. But the most important thing is for you to actually be flexible and adaptive and meet the learner where they're at and model that flexibility. And so we're going to transition now into the moment of with good judgment. This is not the way to give feedback. It's also not the way to debrief, but it's a helpful tool to use to explore a certain challenge to us as faculty. Okay, so what is with good judgment? With good judgment tries to resolve a challenge that we all face, which is our patients and our learners deserve us to keep high standards. I just read in the paper today that Massachusetts AP testing scores have gone up because the tests have gotten easier, okay? Our patients don't deserve our tests getting easier. In fact, our patients are sicker, more complicated, live more socially fractured lives than they did when I was training. And so the standards for today's trainees are just getting higher and higher, and should, right? But how do we have those high standards but still keep high regard for the humans that are trying to reach those standards? And how do we as faculty resolve that challenge? Being nice in a feedback moment is not the right answer, okay? But being clear and having a method of doing it that's supportive of them and what they're trying to do is helpful. So one mindset is, I have high standards for your work, and I have high regard for you as a human. Another mindset is something we call the basic assumption, which probably you all have seen in some moment, but it comes from the Center for Medical Simulation, and this idea that despite what happened in that room, where I wish you'd done X and you did Y, I still believe that you are well-trained, intelligent, cared about doing your best, and want to get better every day. And if I can bring that mindset into the feedback moment, the improvement moment, that will make just about everything else okay. Because when we bring that mindset, what it causes us to do is to say, assuming that this person is well-trained, intelligent, cares about their job, and wants to do better, how is it that they then ended up having this challenge, right? And it leads us to curiosity as opposed to scolding. So it does raise the question, though, why then, when we say, can I give you some feedback, do people immediately believe they're about to get scolded? What do you guys think? Because it's actually, there is this conundrum in feedback research, which is learners say, I don't get any feedback. And then faculty say, I give feedback all day. And if I try to say, can I give you some feedback, they shut down. So what do you think is it that drives us in certain moments to come across as scolding with our feedback?
I think a lot of times positive feedback is given without prompting. You'll say, you did really well in there, I like what you did. But usually when, giving negative feedback is less pleasant, you don't look forward to it. And so when you're asking someone, can I give you feedback, I think it's almost always gonna be something negative is gonna be in there.
That's such a great observation. We use really different techniques for positive and negative feedback. In fact, usually when we give positive feedback, it's a lot less specific. It's more of an appreciation. And we don't get into this exploring of mindset. And there's also data from the business world that it takes about 10-to-1, positive to negative, for people to believe that they're getting balanced amounts of feedback. So our negativity bias just remembers those negative moments. In fact, last night at dinner, we were talking about some of the negative moments from our career that we remember 25 years ago, from when we were learners. And these are seared into our minds. And there's just an imbalance there. So one is we use a really different process. We're much less specific in our observations typically when we give positive feedback. Learners appreciate specifics in positive feedback as well. In fact, you can make a good argument that it's just as important for people to get more reliable at doing the good things as it is for them to improve the performance gaps. Oftentimes when you're learning something, you actually don't even know what a good job is. And so being specific and using this same process for positive and negative is really helpful. Okay, so we're going to get into with good judgment. And we're going to use good judgment in different moments, coaching how, and exploring why, and separating those two approaches. So I'm going to talk about coaching and exploring. Both of these can be done with transparency, with the basic assumption, with high standards. Okay, our learners and our patients deserve good results. And those results come to some extent from the actions that people take. And if we want to change the actions that people take, one way of changing those actions is to coach them how. Hey, I saw you do this. Next time, can I give you some advice? Do it that way. That's a really helpful way of feedback. Okay? Super helpful. In fact, it's going to be the most common one you use. It's quick, it's pointed, but there's a challenge. There are several challenges. And that's because there's this whole world that we don't see when we're coaching on actions. And that world is the frames or the drivers of those actions. And if we can explore why people do what they do, we have an opportunity to change more than just those specific actions in that specific moment, but their ways of seeing the world. So oftentimes in healthcare, we believe that people don't do quote unquote the right thing because they just don't know. And sometimes that is the case. But in the complex world of a workday, that is probably the least likely answer. Okay? There are some of the drivers of action are the situation that we're in. How do people rank certain values conflicts. For example, in the emergency department, speed versus accuracy. And when do you value accuracy over speed, and when do you value speed over accuracy, is a really challenging thing to think about. And it's something that people need to learn. Let's say for patients presenting with abdominal pain, how do people learn when do I need to slow down and when is it just biliary colic, right? So this tension between speed and accuracy and resource utilization in the emergency department is a really big one. Understanding why people made the decisions they made is the key to having that conversation, as opposed to just telling people, you need to ask every patient with abdominal pain if they have a family history of aortic syndrome. All right, well, I think now, like 25 years into emergency medicine, my key skill is knowing, well, actually, really, when do I need to ask that question, right? As opposed to having a rule about it. What corners can I cut? Okay, so with good judgment, generally gets to exploring the why behind behavior, the frames, with the goal of, if we can expose those factors. I was overwhelmed. I was stressed. By the way, when you're overwhelmed and stressed, you don't have access to the knowledge that you normally have. Does anybody here have test anxiety? Yeah, and I've had test anxiety. And in those moments, you can't believe that you can't answer that question, right? Because if you were less anxious, you'd be able to answer it. So that happens in our clinical space too. Somebody decompensates unexpectedly in front of you, somebody that you care about, that you've been caring for all week, you panic. And you don't have access to the knowledge that you have. So telling that person an answer is not the solution to their problem. It's actually exploring, how do you regulate yourself when you're facing an unexpected crisis? So there's a risk when we just coach on actions that we miss all of the reasons and we miss an opportunity. And our learners will not tell us when we're making a fool of ourselves and telling them something they already know. They will smile and say thank you. Is that true, guys? Right? When your attending looks at you and tells you something you already know, you're just like, okay, thanks, yeah, right. And so we will miss an opportunity and we'll kind of invalidate ourselves in the learner's eyes because we actually didn't fix their problem. Okay, so there is a role for teaching. Teaching is something I'm doing right now. Telling people a way of doing things. Right and wrong, demonstrations. Early learners with that particular topic need teaching. They need straightforward examples. There's also a role for coaching. How does this person be the best version of themselves in that situation? And we argue that there's also a role for exploring. And how do I tell, I'm sorry, the Zoom is really, there's a time delay between the Zoom and my slides, and when I'm trying to march through it, it's confusing me. So there's a question of how do I tell what technique I should use in what moment, right? I have a learner who did something. I have a fourth-year medical student who was in a simulation, and they did not follow the ACLS algorithm. How do I know? Should I coach in that moment and tell them, hey, I would do it this way, well, you try it that way, or should I explore? Why did they do what they did? To some extent, a really helpful trigger for us in those moments is to ask, is there a right answer here? How confident am I that there is a right answer that they should be judged against? Or is it a topic that there's really not a right answer for? I have my opinion, I have my judgment about it, but there's room here for a lot of good ways of doing it. Sometimes ACLS is the right answer, but not in an intraoperative code, right? And so we have to be wise enough to know when there's a right answer and when this is actually a topic that doesn't have a lot of research around it. And we have to be wise enough to know when there's a clear standard or this is something that we should just explore together. For example, the topic that I've used over and over is how do you lead a team during a resuscitation? I don't think there's a right answer to that. Okay, so how do we do this skill of having a with good judgment conversation so that the people we're talking to can start to think about why they did what they did and can verbalize that to us, and then we can try to help. So we want to team with the person and name the topic. I'd like to talk to you about, would this be a good time to talk about leading a team during a resuscitation? And then we have to give a concrete observation. I saw you did X. I saw that the team was pretty loud and you did not pause the team and regroup. And I think that when the team is getting loud and you don't pause and regroup, that there's often delays and it feels just uncoordinated and negative things happen for the patient, meds are missed, etc. And then we have to be curious. So I have my opinion. You didn't meet the standard, but what was going on for you in that moment? Why did you do what you did? That way we can disclose our point of view, our judgment against the standard that we have. We can disclose it, but we can do it in a way that opens up the possibility that it's okay that you did what you did. There's a good reason why you did what you did. Let's talk about that. And oftentimes, people don't pause a team when they're learning because they think there's not enough time, right? And so this is a values conflict between speed and team coordination. And negotiating that values conflict, that's an exploration conversation. That's not telling people how to do things. And we make a mistake when we think people need a lot more coaching, even early learners. In the complexity of healthcare, they probably need a lot more exploring. There's probably a lot fewer right answers. We talked about, I'm going to just forward through this because I just gave this part. We talked about how we can think that there's a really right answer, but there's actually a lot of right answers for when do you pause and when do you get the team back on track. Okay, so in your mind, what are some good reasons why you pause and get a team back on track if you're running a resuscitation or any kind of team? Or a meeting?
There's a hazard for it.
There's a hazard? So if there's something happening that is putting people at risk, it would motivate you to take this action. Great, thanks Les. Other people, what motivates you to take action when a team is getting disorganized?
The need to refocus.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing is the kind of chaos really is a distraction for you. And if you're trying to lead the team, you need to rein that in. Great. Others? I know there's a lot of ED people in here. I know you've been in messy codes.
Like a change in the patient's status, so like if they're relatively stable and then all of a sudden see the patient crashing or they're going bradycardic, then you need to refocus.
Yeah, there are these key moments, right, where the team needs to come together. Great. Okay. So what's important about this is there are actually 3 different enabling frames that people have. And there are many, many others. You guys have your own. There is not one right enabling frame that allows people to get up the courage to tell a team to stop what they're doing and reorganize, which is a courageous act in healthcare. And we can help our learners to build new enabling frames, but ours don't necessarily work for them, which is why coaching doesn't always work, okay? Each person needs, it's like learning. Learning is idiosyncratic. Your enabling frames for important actions are also idiosyncratic to you. They only belong to you. Your set of them is yours. And while you're learning, you may want to be like your attendings. You may want to be like Brian, right? But you'll never be Brian. But you will be a good version of yourself, right? And so you want to take little pieces. This is where the variability is actually helpful. You take, oh, I like how Orion does that. These are called role model moments. And role model moments are so important because, I'm going to skip through this. Role model moments are so important because mostly what people learn is what they see you do, okay? Despite how powerful with good judgment is, modeling is actually probably the most important form of learning that happens. And there are role model moments, and there are also troll model moments, okay? And you learn as much from the people you don't want to be like as the people you do want to be like, right? But it's not actually just the whole person, it's individual performance moments that you see them do. So the big question then becomes, how do I, as a faculty, model being a good receiver of feedback? Oh, okay. So, that's a tough one. When I had this great case, I'm just going to tell you a story about trying and failing to be a receiver of feedback in front of my learner. So I was working one day and this guy came in with stridor saying he was choking on a chicken bone. And I did a nasopharyngoscopy scope on him and saw he had a bay leaf sitting on his vocal cords. A bay leaf. I mean, I've been told my whole life, you gotta take the bay leaf out of the soup. And I never believed it. And here it was. This guy was choking to death on a bay leaf, sitting directly on his vocal cords. By the way, a bay leaf looks exactly like the exit to an eye gel or an LMA, right? It's the same shape. It just sits directly on your vocal cords. So I called the ENT and I said, the most interesting case. This guy came in, he's 56 years old, blah, 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 blah. And I was about to get to the bay leaf and he interrupted me and he said, what do you need from me? And I took the phone, I'm like, what a jerk, you know? Does he know who I am? I'm a communications expert. I need you to come see this patient and take the bay leaf off his larynx right now. And he said, okay, great, I'll be right there. He came down and I was having this conversation with the resident about how to deal with consultants who are jerks, right? And then that night it hit me. Oh, that was feedback. I actually didn't tell him what he needed. And I didn't recognize that he's a busy proceduralist in the office. I'm interrupting and ruining his day. And I needed to start with, hey, I need you to come down and see this guy. He's got a bay leaf on his larynx. He can't breathe. It's an emergency. That's all he needed, right? And so I was receiving feedback, but that feedback was a threat to my identity as a communications expert. And I couldn't see it as feedback in that moment. And so the next day, luckily I was working with that resident again, and we had this conversation about how, okay, I went home and I thought about this, and really I think my learning here is that when it seems like an interesting case to me, I lose my structure and I lose my empathy for the person on the other end of the phone, and I kind of like fall into the my excitement about the case. And there might be other reasons why that happens to you, like if it's a really severe crisis, that you lose your structure. And the world is always giving us feedback on our performance. It's just happening in ugly, poorly given ways most of the time. Like my wife, when she said, "Don't use your SimLab bullshit on me," was being really generous, actually, with feedback in that moment by saying, "This is not the right time. This is not the right place for you to talk to me about the skillet in the stove. And by the way, if you'd asked, it got left out by our child and it was covered in mouse poo. And you can just fix it. You can just cure it. It's not that big a deal, but I sent it through the Sandy cycle. Thank you very much." Right? So when we get into these modes where it's something we're passionate about, and we lose our structure and we lose our empathy for the person on the other end of the conversation, we stop being able to see the signals of feedback. And then we model that for our learners and we start to tell them, "No, this ENT is a jerk." When in fact, what he was doing was delivering me not too elegant feedback about my performance. So if we can see those things for what they are, feedback that we need to be better at receiving in front of our learners, and we can model receiving it, then we will do more to create a culture where feedback is accepted than any technique that I could teach you right now. Okay, people do much more of what they see higher up in the hierarchy do than they do what you tell them to do. If you have children, you know this is true. They do not do what you tell them to do. So focusing on when is my identity being threatened by the data I'm getting from the world, and how can I recognize that as a feedback moment and not react to it, but accept it, and then talk about that openly with our learners. We'll do more to promote this culture of feedback than any particular technique that I could talk about. Okay, so I would like to hear, because we are at the end here, what's one thing that you're maybe taking away from this conversation that we had? What stood out to you? Anyone?
I think the concept of exploring the frame or where they're coming from first.
Great, thank you. And so I want to ask, what small action do you think you'll take based on that standing out? Thank you for voluntolding. Yeah.
Yeah. To exploring frames.
Okay.
How's that?
So be curious and hey, why'd you do that? By the way, I'm telling you a way of doing it. Let's talk about X. I think, I wonder. If you're just coming to the conversation with curiosity, hey, well, what happened there? But you guys all know how to have that conversation just by being human. Then you'll get there. Thank you.
I think timing. I think usually I will always give mid-rotation feedback as generic. So, but it's always at the end of rounds. And sometimes if it's been a super busy day, it's probably not the ideal time. So maybe before rounds.
Yeah, great. And these subtle little moves. Life is really subtle. Turns it from accepted to rejected, or rejected to accepted.
Do you mind repeating into the microphone? Just a little bit of feedback for you.
Thank you.
But I do have one.
Yeah.
When we develop our evaluation sheets for faculty to use in giving feedback, be more explicit about the rubric, about the benchmarks that we want them to evaluate our students or our learners on.
Beautiful. Okay, and we do have a paper coming out hopefully soon on a method, a cohesive method for training faculty for using rubrics. So that's such an important topic. Okay, yes. So I want to repeat what I heard. I will try to explore the frames. I will try to choose the right moment, which I usually give feedback after rounds, and maybe before rounds would work better. And then developing rubrics co-developing rubrics and then training people on how to use them.
This is actually kind of an observation for me, question for you. Through this talk, I've been thinking about, as a med student, how I've responded to feedback conversations over the past 4 years. Usually I get asked, is now time for feedback? And I go, what are some better ways that you've seen learners use to indicate that they're actually ready to hear the feedback versus like indicate to you that maybe they just need a nice word, let's talk about like the nitty-gritty tomorrow.
Okay, so the question is, as the recipient of the like assent for feedback conversation, so we talk about getting assent for a feedback conversation or consent. I might say, hey, would now be a good time to talk about how you could get better? And the question is, what if now is not a good time? So that's such a good question. I have ideas about that, but I'm curious. I'm quite a ways, 25 years out of medical school. Do our students or our medical students or our residents have ways that you've learned to deal with that?
Can you repeat the question?
So when somebody wants to give you developmental feedback, but you can't hear it in that moment, but you also don't necessarily feel like you want to speak up because you want to be receptive to feedback, how do you square that circle? It's like, right now is not the right moment, but I also want to appear that I'm the kind of person who takes feedback well. And I do want it, just not right at this second.
I feel like it's very culture dependent. Like it might not always be like appropriate for a medical student to ask for that autonomy. And I think that like that's really bred from the culture itself. And so like if you're in a culture where there's openness to that prospect, like I think it's better. But I feel like I would not be comfortable saying, should I do this tomorrow? Or like, you know, it's just like a hierarchy.
Yeah, wow, okay. So there might be, potentially there might be individual faculty that you feel, or situations, departments, organizations where you might be able to speak up, but by and large not really, it doesn't really feel right. Yeah, oh, it's really interesting. One of my colleagues, when he feels these tensions, just says, I feel some tension right now. Because I want to hear your feedback, and I also was told I was supposed to put orders in for that new admission. And you know how we're supposed to get orders in within a certain period of time. I'm not sure how to square that, so potentially sharing that tension with them, I think might be again, transparency is king here. If you can, what is getting in your way of being the person that you want to be in that moment, if you can share that openly, I think that that's valid in most circumstances and actually appreciated in most circumstances.
Maybe also add that you can try and drive the conversation yourself as a student if you can't really say no, or like the structure of you often have to ask for EPAs, so you can't really avoid getting feedback in that moment, but maybe just saying like, oh, what did you think I did, or how I did about this one thing that maybe mentally you're like open to processing at the moment, and then hopefully after that 1 minute of feedback, they can say good job.
Okay, so to some extent you can drive the conversation about what is important to you when there's a particular moment that you're curious about. That is also really important. The gap there, and I'm just looking at the time, we're a little bit over. The gap there is that the most important feedback you get is feedback about topics that you are blind to. And that's why you feel blindsided by it. And it takes you some time to recover from it because it wasn't even on your radar. So we can't, unfortunately, have anyone only receive feedback that they want. And that's why as faculty, we're giving somebody a gift when we deal with these issues that is a blind spot to them. And potentially that's more threatening. But if we can go there with them in the relational moment of being a mentor and being a helpful coach, then if we've built enough trust up, then we can potentially deal with those issues. All right, I'm just looking at my facilitators for time norms.
Okay.
We can keep going?
We have a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody needs to get up and go to rounds or
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
You could go, but otherwise.
Okay.
It's great to
Yeah,
see you.
okay, great. So we'll keep the conversation going, you let me know. Yeah, so what was your,
I just
Yeah.
wanted to say, so I've done a lot of, I'm thinking, reflecting on all the faculty development that I've done about how to give feedback, where one of the slides always has a thing about like, the first part, which is, can I give you some feedback? But now what I'm thinking about is maybe I should change that to say, when is a good time for feedback? So that we don't let the learners put them in a position where they feel uncomfortable.
oh, yes or no is a hard
Right.
question for them in that moment. So the comment was, we've kind of been trained to say, could I give you some feedback right now? And to the point in the back is, that's a yes or no question, and no doesn't really feel very good. But if we say, when would be a good time? That is an open question. It even starts the whole thing caring about the other person and their priorities. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that.
I guess to build off of Dr. Kidd's comment, I feel like attending sort of tend to try to give feedback at the end of the week on the Sunday, right before you go right there at that and so, or at the stations, and so you almost feel like you don't have a choice. You either get feedback now or you never get feedback from them. And I know one attending has offered, like on the next following week when you're off service, come to my office whenever you're free to get feedback. And it gives you an option because you're also on Sunday trying to go home and finish work.
Yeah.
So just having options about when you can
Yeah.
receive the feedback is helpful because I've been in situations where I feel like I would never get feedback unless I drop everything and get it right now.
It's like, this is the moment that I could hear how I'm doing. And if I don't value it now, I might never get it. And so the kind of end of the rotation feedback moment is positive in that it's our opportunity, but it's a downside in that I might have other pressing things and I feel like that's my only option sometimes. So potentially receiving options, it's so beautiful. It is also making me think that using the word feedback sometimes is charged. And so there is some research that's, if your goal is a check-in, right? Let's just have a check-in Tuesday of the week. Well, that's a feedback moment. It's a two-way feedback moment, right? And we need to start recognizing it as that. How are you doing? How am I doing? Helping you. That is actually a feedback moment. So for the learners who say I never get any feedback, if we call it a check-in, that's feedback. Also, there's research that said, and Deb, I'll get right to you, that says that if we say, hey, could I give you some advice? That is very well tolerated. But if we say, can I give you some feedback? It's not so well tolerated. So potentially using different words. Could I coach you a little bit on leading a team? These things are better received, and that's why kind of feedback challenge moments are charged when we label them that way. But we can label them differently for closer to what they are.
I think you kind of answered my question. The school, right, the graduation questionnaire is very important for the school. And there's always questions like that. Are you getting enough feedback? Are you being observed? Are you doing this? And the results are not what they want the school. So now we've decided as faculty, we have to explicitly say, you are getting feedback now. So that on that questionnaire, they say yes.
This is such a tension, yeah. So the school gives a questionnaire, did you get adequate feedback? And this is across medicine. Learners say, I didn't get any feedback. And faculty say, I gave them feedback the whole time. So one solution is, I am going to give you some feedback. Doing it at the beginning. But that's in tension with this other idea that maybe we should label it a check-in or something. Maybe you could say at the end of the conversation, that was a feedback conversation. And you might enter into it easier, and at the end just say, hey, that was a two-way feedback conversation. What I learned was X, Y, and Z. What did you learn? And that, I think, could label it, but not maybe charge it.
So we're past time. Dr. Setnik is available for a few minutes, so I'm going to let people go. But if you have any other questions and you want to speak to him directly, you're welcome to come up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr.
So there's a phenomenal book. It's very short. It's called Thanks for the Feedback. And Doug Stone and Sheila Heen goes over a lot of these ideas. Also a podcast, yeah.
It's about receiving feedback.
It's the science and art of receiving feedback. Yeah, when it's off base, unfair, poorly delivered, and frankly, you're not in the mood. Yeah.
That seems like all three.
Yeah.
Great talk.
Hey, thank
I'd
you.
love to stay and talk more, but I have other important meetings.
Yeah. You're feeling
It's so important.
Yeah.
Reframing it as instead of giving you feedback, it's giving you advice, which I would think the opposite. I feel like advice is subjective, and feedback is more objective and less about person than about system. Yeah. So I don't experiment. Yeah. I mean, I feel like if I said like, can I give you some advice? I don't know. It's just it makes it more about my feelings and them as a person, and less about the action on his.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, this is just one article that.
Right.
Yeah. I think there could even be.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to dinner yesterday. I know you had to leave early, but thanks for coming. I'm sorry.
Right, you know, and there might be places where it's like poisonous.
Yeah.
Where I mean, that's right here. And there's, you know, medicine is speaking up in amazing ways. Yeah. Hey, thanks for your contributions. Yeah. Oh, well, okay. Excellent. Oh, but thank you. You're looking down. I don't want to, like, be towering over you. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Thanks.